Namo Namo Okay, thank you all for being here this evening. Lovely. Yeah, with the bronchitis, I could probably use that. Thank you. It's like Pavlov. If I bring it up, it's will be the cough. I just need to think healthy thoughts for the next hour and a half. Okay, so we are still on the theme of compassion, as you might imagine. It's a large subject, and there's still plenty more to say. Tonight, I'll start with a few remarks, and then we've been talking sort of in the abstract about elements of compassion from the Buddhist tradition. I tonight want to explore a few specific techniques that Buddhists have used in order to increase their compassion, sort of make it stronger, extend it to others, make it more deep and more meaningful in their lives. So some specific Buddhist practices related to this. One thing I do want to note, though, I sort of mentioned in passing in one of my previous lectures that compassion and wisdom are seen as sort of a pair in the Buddhist tradition. You really need both. Buddhahood, rather, the achievement of Buddhahood is the perfecting of wisdom and compassion. Basically, the definition of a Buddha from the Mahayana standpoint is a person who has perfect wisdom and perfect compassion. That is to say, perfected wisdom and perfected compassion over a process of practice. And this leads then, of course, to liberation from suffering and ignorance. Well, it so happened, because I've been talking about compassion, I've been paying a lot of attention to this theme, even just as I go about my sort of daily work. And I noticed something by a scholar named Richard Gombrich. He's a big-time Buddhist studies professor at Oxford University in England. And so I saw a little breadcrumb or something from him, so I followed up on it because I wanted to bring it up with you guys. What Dr. Gombrich knows is that he's been doing sort of this textual analysis of very early Buddhist texts, looking at them again, not simply from the standpoint of how do Buddhists today read those texts, like what do they say is important and what do they pay attention to, kind of reading them on their own, like in a locked room, just reading them. What do they actually say? What do they seem to reveal about early Buddhism, which in some ways we've elaborated on and evolved from? One striking thing that he noticed about these texts, which doesn't get highlighted as much in the later tradition, is that he notes how apparently the Buddha is teaching his followers that perfecting your compassion is one way to achieve nirvana itself. So if you get perfect compassion, that itself will result in nirvana. This is not something that later Buddhism has so strongly emphasized. It's more strongly emphasized the need to perfect your wisdom, which will then see through everything, and then naturally compassion will result from this. Compassion is not unimportant, but it sort of went strongly on the wisdom side in many cases. And as he rereads the Buddha from the earliest texts, the ones that are closest in time to the Buddha himself, and most likely to preserve his words more or less the way he spoke them, he's finding that the Buddha was actually teaching wisdom as a path and teaching compassion as a path. You could put them together, but he was also sort of teaching them independent of one another. And so there were disciples who were best suited to sort of intensive meditation, insight, and liberating themselves through wisdom. And he had other disciples who appeared to have been better suited for liberating themselves through the practice of compassion. So he taught this apparently as a more or less self-sufficient path, which is something that we haven't emphasized as much in the later Buddhist tradition. So I was kind of intrigued by what he was saying there. Basically, what he's sort of noting, and he quotes the Buddha to demonstrate his argument here, says that the Buddha talks about how acting and thinking compassionately, this leads to purification of your thoughts and actions. So if you act compassionately, there's a purification of your actions that takes place here. And if you think compassionately, there's a purification of your mental states that takes place here. And in this early phase of Buddhism, nirvana, among other definitions, one definition of nirvana is that purity of thought and action, like true purity of thought and action. That is nirvana. That is one way that nirvana is explained by the Buddha during this early phase of Buddhism. So if your mind is pure and your actions are pure, they don't have any clinging in them, they don't have any delusion, no anger, no greed or anything like this. By definition, therefore, those are nirvanic thoughts and actions, and so you have reached nirvana. And how does one purify one's thoughts and actions? Well, in this particular, somewhat neglected earlier stream of Buddhism, apparently one did so by being and thinking compassionately towards others. So that was itself seen as a totally valid path. Again, it's not that the later Buddhist tradition disavows this, but it has come to be sort of eclipsed in terms of the amount of attention that's been given in the tradition. We talk all about compassion and the need for compassion, but we don't tend to stress compassion itself as a fully self-sufficient path all the way to nirvanic liberation itself. So, I thought that was quite an interesting find that this Buddhologist had. I have to say, these are early teachings for high-level monks in most cases. I'm not sure how valid this is a path for us today in terms of like total awakening. My experience as a person, and my experience of other people, is that there's some very good people, but very few, if any of us, are able to achieve true total purity of thought at all times and total purity of action at all times. This is one reason why, of course, we rely on other power, on Amida Buddha and the Jodo Shinshu tradition. So we probably can't get all the way there ourselves by practicing compassion. But on the other hand, there's nothing holding us back from trying our best, doing our best, and relying on other power to help us to get to the rest of the way there. So I was just kind of intrigued by this thing that I noted in Dr. Gombrich's recent book put out by the Oxford Center for Buddhist Studies. All right. However, what I really want to talk with you guys tonight is, I think we've established over the last couple of lectures the importance of compassion, whether it's because we try to get all the way to nirvana or simply because this is one of the core Buddhist ideals. So how do we increase our compassion? How does compassion come about from a Buddhist standpoint? And that's what I sort of want to focus on here tonight. Now, I have several other handouts I brought with me. I didn't just hand them out right away because I wasn't sure exactly how many of these I'll get to. But I would like to maybe hand out the first of them. If I could just have somebody pass this around. We'll go through some of this. Thank you very much. So, how do Buddhists become more compassionate? That's the question that we have here. And the first document that I'm passing around here, don't worry, you'll all get a copy in just a moment here. I've got an excerpt from the Loving Kindness Sutra. This is another early Buddhist text from about the same time period as the text that Gombrich was looking at, was referring to. This is known as the Metta Sutta in Pali, or to translate it, we would call this the Loving Kindness Sutra. Here it comes for you guys on this side. So perhaps you remember in one of my early lectures, I talked about something called the 4 Brahma Viharas. Do any of us recall this? The 4 Brahma Viharas. These are the 4 divine abodes, or 4 divine dwellings. And one of those was karuna, meaning compassion. That's why I brought these up. Really, in a way, there's sort of like 4 different aspects of compassion. Another one of those Brahma Viharas was metta. Metta, the word meaning loving kindness. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, this is a sutra. This is, in other words, a sermon from the Buddha about loving kindness, loving kindness directly connected to compassion in the Buddhist mindset. And I thought perhaps looking at this would give us a little glimpse at how Buddhists have gone about this. This is the sutra, and then there's a practice that comes out of this sutra. So let's look at the source first, and then we'll look at the practice that results from this. I'll read this through here. These are Buddhist scriptures, so they're often quite lovely. So in translation, how does this loving kindness sutra go? If you have glimpsed the state of perfect peace, in other words, gotten a glimpse of nirvana, and therefore seek to promote what's best, then be able, honest, and upright, gentle in speech, meek and not proud. Contented, you should not be a burden to others, not over busy and simple in living. Tranquil your senses, let yourself be prudent, and not brazen nor seeking favor. And here's where we get into the important part now with the next lines. Refrain from any action that gives the wise reason to reprove you. Then cultivate the thought. May all be well and secure. May all beings be happy. Whatever living beings there be, without exception, weak or strong, long, huge or middle-sized, or short, minute or bulky, whether visible or invisible, and those living far or near, the born and those seeking rebirth, may all beings be happy. So the Buddha is recommending that you cultivate these thoughts. This is going to be the source then for the meditation practice that arises from this. He goes on to say, let none deceive or decry his fellow anywhere. Let none wish others harm in resentment or in hate. Just as with her own life, a mother shields from hurt her only child, let all embracing thoughts for all beings be yours. Cultivate an all-embracing mind of love for all throughout the universe. In all its height, depth, and breadth, love that is untroubled and beyond hatred or enmity. This is an important part, I think, here. An all-embracing mind of love for all throughout the universe. This is sort of the ultimate goal of the Buddhist compassion. It's not limited to a few people around you or people who deserve compassion in some way. True, perfected compassion from the standpoint of the Buddha embraces all beings unconditionally, no matter who or where they are. Final lines here. As you stand, walk, sit, or lie, so long as you are awake, pursue this awareness with your might. It is deemed the divine abode, that is to say the Brahma Vihara, here and now. So, in this sermon, the Buddha is recommending that Buddhists of his time go about at all times thinking these sort of loving, kind thoughts towards others, right? As you stand, walk, sit, or lie. In other words, in any activity throughout the day that you find yourself engaged in, cultivate these mental habits. And he sort of tells you what you should be thinking. Think about, may everyone be well, may everyone be secure, no matter who they may be, These are sort of regular lists you find, long, huge, or middle-sized. Right? You find these throughout the Buddhist tradition. What they mean is they mean to indicate all beings that there could possibly be. So this is the scriptural source for a practice then that evolved in the Buddhist tradition. Just a moment. Now, there's many different forms of Buddhism, as I've mentioned before, and as many of you are aware. This particular practice that I'm going to describe here comes to us from the Theravada tradition. But it has been present in other traditions, various Mahayana traditions, for example. So although it has been sort of most especially preserved and transmitted through that tradition, it has connections with other traditions as well. I've actually purposefully chosen a few examples from different types of Buddhism to demonstrate how this cultivation, this intentional cultivation of compassion, is something that we find really in every type of Buddhism here. So might as well take examples from different places. All right. So now I have my next handout. take some and pass them back, right? And I'll put some over here. Take some, I think, and just, yeah, pass them back. It should be enough for everyone on both sides. Okay. So this is an actual meditation technique. It may be that, just making sure that everyone's getting one. It looks like everyone. Good. Okay. It may be that we have a sort of stereotyped idea of what meditation is. Often we think meditation is sitting with your back straight, and your hands in your lap, and being very quiet, and following your breath perhaps, breathing in, breathing out, and just doing that for a long, long period of time. That is, of course, one type of meditation, but there's a great diversity of different meditation techniques in the various Buddhist traditions. So this is another one. That's sort of just following your breath or just sitting, not thinking of anything. That's what we call a formless meditation. But there's a great many types of meditation that have forms to them. So they describe specifically what you should do, how you should sort of follow the meditation as it goes along. This is one of those meditations with form, because it meditates on loving kindness, meditates in order to increase loving kindness. So let me look at this here with you all. This is what we call metta, or loving kindness meditation. So if you're going to perform this meditation, it is loving kindness, that's an emotion. So it's an emotion that needs to have an object. And as this meditation proceeds, you go through a list of different objects for your loving kindness, for your compassion. You begin with yourself in this practice. So if you were going to do this practice, what you would do is sort of find a few moments in your day, sit down, and mentally, usually, you can say these out loud, but mentally, typically, repeat these stanzas to yourself and do the things that they're asking. So, first you think, may I be free from danger. May I have mental happiness. May I have physical happiness. May I have ease of well-being. And often these are done in a much more slow manner. I'm sort of reading them out quickly. But what you would really do is you would sit and you would just do the first one. May I be free from danger. And you would think this to yourself. Meditate on this. Meditate on yourself being free from danger. For some few moments, maybe a few minutes. Then, when you sort of had a grasp of that, you would move on. May I have mental happiness. You would sort of meditate on that for a while. In a way, you can kind of imagine you're kind of like beaming mental happiness at yourself in a way. Use kind of psychological language there. And then you move on. May I have physical happiness. And then you move on from that. May I have ease of well-being. So it starts with yourself. The idea being that although in the West we have these notions of poor self-esteem and things like this, nonetheless, on some extent, self-cherishing is something that virtually all humans have. We may have complicated a bit by being able to be self-cherishing and self-loathing at the same time, but there is typically the desire for one to be happy and secure in some manner, right? So the Buddha, in a very practical way, starts with yourself. It's not so hard to wish these things for yourself. Then, in this practice, you move on to, it begins to sort of widen the circle of compassion. So you move from yourself, from self-centeredness. Now you focus on an other. And again, it's practical. It goes to the most likely sort of next object. So, may someone that I love deeply is what they recommend. This is often a parent. Some people have difficult relationships with their parents, so it isn't required to be a parent. But if it were, this would be, may my mother be free from danger, or may my father be free from danger, or may my child be free from danger. someone that is close to you, intimately close to you, that you can have this sort of already, sort of deep love for. So in this meditation, you're sort of developing further loving kindness for them. May this person that I love deeply, may they be free from danger. May they have mental happiness. May they have physical happiness. May they have ease of well-being. And typically, in the monastic tradition that this evolves from, you would meditate on that person, sending the loving kindness towards them in your mind for something like 15 to 20 minutes on average. So you're really sort of steeping in this for a while. It's not just a passing thought. It's like, not just like, have a good day, wish you well, take care. So it's like concentrating on it, developing this. We talk about practice. These are exercises. These are mental exercises, these meditations. And just like with exercise, you don't just lift the barbell once and woohoo, you're Superman, right? Like you do it. It's a repeated action. You do it for a period of time, and you do it each day also. So you develop these, in this case, healthy mental and emotional muscles. And I think maybe I would say something about that actually, because we sometimes have a stereotype of Buddhism as a religion of detachment. Emotion is bad. Get rid of emotion or something. I hear this sometimes from my students in class, right? They imagine that like the Buddha is like Mr. Spock from Star Trek or something. He's perfectly logical, so he doesn't suffer, so he's a Buddha or something like this. This is not really the ideal in this way, right? These are healthy emotions that are being cultivated. Loving kindness is certainly an emotion. Compassion is certainly an emotion. And these were things directly recommended by the Buddha. In fact, the definition of Buddhism is perfect compassion and perfect wisdom. So there is an emotional state there, but it's a purified one, a perfected one.
And a Buddha can only exist on earth, not really exist on earth,
Can a Buddha exist on earth? Is that the question? I'm sorry. There is sort of a loud hum behind me. I can't hear very well from the audience. Certainly Shakyamuni Buddha was a human being who lived quite some time ago. According to the Buddhist tradition, there have been many Buddhas throughout time. Different traditions teach that differently. Some say there's one, and then a long period, and then a second one, and then a long period, and then a third. Others recognize many Buddhas simultaneously. So it certainly seems to be possible, but it doesn't seem terribly frequent, does it?
Is it Dalai Lama?
It really depends on who you ask. So from the point of view of his most devout followers, the answer would be yes. Not just like because they like him, but from an actual Orthodox teaching perspective in that tradition. He would be perceived to be, they say he's an incarnation of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the person I've talked about in the past, or Chenrezig is the Tibetan word for this being. But, and we sometimes say a Bodhisattva is someone who's working to become a Buddha, isn't quite. But frankly, in the Tibetan tradition, it gets really kind of messy, and the difference between a Buddha and a Bodhisattva doesn't really matter in that tradition. So he is essentially believed to be an incarnated Buddha of compassion.
But who determines whether you're all wise or compassionate?
I'm sorry, you just had to speak up a little.
What determines whether you're all compassionate or wise?
What determines it?
Yeah.
Well, from an objective point of view, you would be all wise if you don't have any delusion, if you see things just as they truly are. From a compassion side, you would be all compassionate if you are truly compassionate, truly care about all others, and care about them equally. So, like, I can maybe have some abstract compassion for, I'm trying to think of someone I don't like or someone I think is really bad. No one's coming to mind. But let's imagine Hitler or someone, right? I'm thinking, unfortunately it's a dead person, but imagine, like, or Osama bin Laden, also dead, but recently, right? I could, in some abstract way, have some sort of compassion for that person. But the compassion that I would feel for Osama bin Laden is not the same level of compassion that I feel for, like, my wife. Okay? That is the difference between me and a right there. Because the Buddha would feel the same compassion for all of these people. Because there's a purified, a perfected compassion that doesn't discriminate amongst what we think of as good and bad, or between close and far. Like some total stranger who might be an awesome person, but is basically a stranger to me, I can't feel the same compassion really for that person as I feel for my wife or my children or something. They might be better people, well, frankly, but I just don't know them. I haven't spent the time with them, right? The Buddha is not thinking in the same way. The Buddha relates to everyone as being equally worthy and, yeah, all sentient beings. Actually, that's a good point. A Buddha, it's not just like my wife versus Hitler. It's like my wife versus a mosquito, right? Like equal compassion for all living things there. I can affirm that ideal as a Buddhist. I can wish to achieve that level someday. I can do my best to try to expand my compassion, including through techniques such as this. But let's face it, at the end of the day, I'm a lot more worried if my wife stubs her toe than if I kill a mosquito. So I'm just not actually a Buddha in this situation.
One last question. I suppose we're supposed to not have ego when we're Buddhists, but isn't it very egotistical to want to be Buddha, to be all compassionate and all wise and all?
Not from the understanding of the Mahayana tradition, because the idea, and we're actually going to be talking about a bit of this in a few minutes, the idea is that you seek Buddhahood for the sake of others. You do not seek Buddhahood for your own self. This is one thing that distinguishes the Mahayana tradition from certain other Buddhist traditions, right? You have to give up the ego to achieve that goal, so it's a natural casualty of the process itself, is the way it's understood. A question or a comment?
Just a comment, actually. You mentioned Hitler versus, I'm sorry, I don't remember now what you were saying. You said compassion for your wife versus Hitler.
Or somebody, yeah.
Yeah, no,
I'm trying to think of someone negative.
No,
yeah.
well, exactly. He definitely didn't do, I mean, as far as history is concerned, he didn't do that well in his life. But if you read my talk, you actually get an understanding of where a lot of his distorted thinking patterns came from. So you can have some compassion for him, not because he hurt people, but because he was so messed up inside that he didn't know the difference between right and wrong.
Right. So I don't think that we can simply let Hitler or other bad people off the hook. But no, I agree with you here. So, but even though we can't,
I'm just saying, you could have compassion for him. That's all I was going to say before you get into that.
I agree. So let me make my point.
Okay.
So I agree with you. It doesn't let the person off the hook, and yet we can understand where negativity and even evil come from. They have sources. Those sources ultimately are the same sources of the problems we create for ourselves as well. So some people go way off the deep end with these things, but there's no essential difference between us and anyone else, right? I am also capable of being protective of myself and being fearful towards others. I'm capable of violence towards others. I'm capable of wishing power for myself. I live in different historical and personal circumstances that have thankfully not caused me to become a Hitler. But in another time and place, perhaps that is possible. You know, this is how we are, and because we share that commonality, this is a reason why we should seek to have compassion for all others. It doesn't mean that, you know, if somebody's pointing a gun at you, you may have to act drastically. But at the same time, the idea of the bodhisattva is that you do what is needed in the situation, but you do so still with a sort of compassion for all the actors in the situation. So, may someone I dislike be free from danger. May someone I dislike, you know. So let's try to think. Oh, that helps. Okay, great. Very good. I wonder if I can think of some example. Okay, so I'll just make up a person. We'll call him, you know, John Doe. Okay, but John Doe is a person at work who I never get along with. Always seems to get in the way of my ideas, my projects. I know how things should be run at my university. This other idiot doesn't understand at all, gets in my way all the time, and so on. So, John Doe, I don't like him. But, may John Doe, may he be free from danger, like honestly, actually free from danger. May John Doe, may he be free from mental suffering. So we spend a lot of our time wishing bad things for the people we don't like and feeling justified about it, right? So-and-so gets in my way. Even on some innocent level, like, I hope they get a cold so they don't come in, so they're not at the meeting and bog us down, and my idea gets passed, and everyone will be better off for it. And this is a cold, he'll get over it, right? Like, that's like a little level. And then there's the things like, so-and-so, I don't like so-and-so, like, they stole something from me, they hit me, they've been bad to me. I hope they get in a car accident, stuff like this. Like, people think this way, too. Like, or you have your elaborate revenge fantasies, like, they humiliated me in the meeting that one time, so next time, I hope they say something dumb, and then I'll have the perfect one-liner, and they'll look like fools in front of everyone, and I will be the source of their distress, and I will win. And it's like this is the way we think as people often. So this is trying to move us away from this ways of thinking, which is not an easy thing to do. That's why it's an exercise, right? It takes repeated work in order to do this. So may that person be free from danger, free from suffering. May they honestly actually be well and at ease. May they truly have it. Now, at first, a lot of times, this is lip service, like in a literal way. We can say it, but it doesn't mean we actually mean it. Or maybe we can think it, okay, they can be happy as long as I never have to see them being happy and they're not around me. Right? This is how we are. Okay, the Buddha will take what he can get. Start there and kind of move you on the path a little further, right? You got to start somewhere. But the idea is to eventually work on this to the point where you can say these things honestly and feel them honestly and mean them honestly in the same way that you did for all these previous categories, from yourself through others. Okay? When you're able to do this, this is when your compassion is being perfected. It doesn't mean it's actually becoming perfect, but it's on that path, right? And then, of course, the final stage here. May all beings throughout the universe be free from danger. May all beings throughout the universe have mental happiness, physical happiness, ease of well-being. So this is back to the all beings. This is not even all people. This is not like, may everybody in Canada, but who cares about China or something. This is everybody. This is every sort of being anywhere on Earth and anywhere alive on any other planet as well. May they all have these things. May they all enjoy these fruits, right? So this is this practice that monks do, and they teach it to lay people as well. And they would do this on a regular basis. Now we may think, well, okay, I can say these things, it may not change me that much. But imagine doing this, and like I said, maybe they spend 15, 20 minutes a day on each of these, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 2 hours, right? I'm not on the math faculty at Waterloo, but I think I got that right. Okay? So imagine spending 2 hours out of your day, if you're dedicated to this practice, really inhabiting this loving kindness and trying to increase it. And then realize it's not 2 hours a day, but it's 2 hours each day, and you're a monk and you live for 70 years or something, right? So this is how people like the Dalai Lama and others are able to sometimes achieve these sort of beatific personalities that we see. It's not an accident. It's not like they were born with more love than other people. They put in the hard work, advancing this compassion. And again, I don't know whether they perfected it either, but they're certainly further down the path in some place, myself included. So this is a very interesting sort of practice to note here. Now I see that there's about 5 minutes here, but I got started a little late. So I wonder if I could move on to a little other material, whether we still have time for a little more. Are we still awake? Are we doing okay? I don't see anyone actively sleeping, so this is already better than my lectures at school. Okay. Yeah, okay. This takes a little while, but I'm going to go ahead and pass this one out as well, because I think we have time. Maybe I'll go another 10 minutes. Maybe we'll have a discussion a little shorter today. I think you'll find this quite interesting. So why don't we go ahead and take a shot at it here, so that you guys in the back have a few as well. Okay, so I'm just going to skip over the all beings have their own mother set, and I'll come back to that in a future lecture. So what I'm passing out here is another excerpt from another Buddhist scripture. This is not from the Sermons of Buddha, so these are not sutras. This is an excerpt from The Way of the Bodhisattva, a text written by Shantideva, a Mahayana Buddhist monk in southern India in the early 700s, so a long time ago, in other words, going on about 1,300 years at this point. This text has been preserved for us in the Tibetan tradition, and is very, very popular in Tibetan Buddhism. But its origins are in general Indian Mahayana, which is to say the same origins for the Jodo Shinshu tradition as well. So I would just want to go in a different direction and show you a different tradition and its take on these things. So Shantideva teaches a number of different types of practices, and one of the interesting ones is the equality of self and other. And I have pulled some of the verses in translation out of this text, and we can see how he's approaching. So this is a later tradition, later Buddhist tradition. How have they sort of elaborated on this idea of loving kindness or compassion for others? So I'll read it here. Hopefully you can hear me even without the microphone. Strive at first to meditate upon the sameness of yourself and others. In joy and sorrow, all are equal. Thus be guardian of all as of yourself. In other words, guard all others the way you guard yourself. The hand and other limbs are many and distinct, but all are one body to be kept and guarded. Likewise, different beings and their joys and sorrows are, like me, all one in wanting happiness. And therefore I'll dispel the pain of others, for it is simply pain just like my own. And others I will aid and benefit, for they are living beings just like me. Since I and other beings both, in wanting happiness, are equal and alike, what difference is there to distinguish us? That I should strive to have my bliss alone. Since I and other beings both, in fleeing suffering, are equal and alike, what difference is there to distinguish us? That I should save myself and not the other. Thus the suffering of everyone should be dispelled, and here there's no debate. To free myself from pain means freeing all. Contrariwise, I suffer with the pain of others. In other words, I cannot be free of pain until all others are free of pain, because I am inextricably interconnected with it. This is the Mahayana vision. When we talk about emptiness, this is what they're talking about. You're empty of self-nature, which means that you are interconnected with all others. So therefore, although I may not directly feel your pain in the same way, you stub your toe, my foot won't hurt. But because we are connected on a deeper level, I can't actually be free of pain until suffering is alleviated from all others. Inevitably, suffering will come around for me because I'm connected to everything else. Hands and other limbs are thought of as the members of a body. Shall we not consider others likewise, limbs and members of a living whole? Those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and other beings should interchange the terms of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. The truth, therefore, is this, that you should wholly give yourself and take the other's place. The Buddha did not lie in what he said. You'll see the benefits that come from it. So what is this? This is the practice of exchanging or equating self and other. This isn't just nice poetry here. This is an actual meditation practice. These are verses that are meant to be acted upon. So the practice in this case is instead of I sit here and I send loving kindness to me, and then I send it to you, and I send it to somebody else in this sort of way. This practice is mentally I switch places with you, so that I walk in your shoes in that way, right? You put yourself in the place of the other. Now you can do this in the same sort of way. Like you can start with someone close to you, switch places with them, and imagine what life must be like from their perspective, and wish them well in their situation. Because you know that if you happen to be the person in their situation, if you actually switch, you would wish the best for that person, right? For yourself in that case. Then you can do it for someone that you're more neutral for. Then you switch yourself with someone you really don't like. And you realize through this practice that whether they're a good or a bad person, they wish to be happy, they wish to be free from suffering, and our goal as Buddhists is to eliminate suffering. And you may be in this process also come to understand in some way that the way they act is based on their experiences and where they're coming from. In fact, when you're over there being them and you look back at you, sometimes you discover, oh, there's some reasons why they act that way, and I'm contributing to this situation, as it turns out. So this is the sort of this is a tantric practice actually, of exchanging self for other instead, inhabiting the other person's position, and using that as a way to develop compassion for others in that way. And we can see sort of the attitude being promulgated here. Seeing all beings as like hands and arms, limbs on the same body. This is the basic attitude that's being put forward here. So a oneness of all beings. This goes back to the same sort of may every being be happy. Well, here you're not just like thinking in the abstract. You're doing your best to actually be all these other beings and wish them happiness in their situation. So again, imagine doing this, exchanging self and other every day for some extended period of time, or walking around doing this during your day. You can do both of it. You walk around shooting metta, loving kindness everyone around you, and you can walk around thinking, what must it be like to be that person, or that person, or you're driving and the person cuts you off and you're angry. I just experienced this about 17 times. Okay? So exchanging self with others. What if suddenly you're the person in that SUV that just did that thing, and why are they acting this way? What must it be?
They're hurrying to wait.
They're hurrying somewhere. They've got an extremely interesting and important Buddhist lecture to give to. They're afraid they're going to miss it. Or they're running to the hospital. There's something wrong. Or they just realized they left the gas on at home. Or something. Like, you put yourself in their position, and suddenly you start to realize that it's not all about their identity is defined by the fact they cut me off. Like, they have a whole other life and things are going on that may well explain it. Now, people also just act like jerks sometimes. And again, this is not excusing those things, but even when you put yourself even in the position of the jerk, you begin to feel more compassion for it. And that's the point here. The point is not actually to change others. It's not our role. The point is changing yourself, developing compassion. This is what the practice is here.